Alright, so now I'm going to start working on getting this radiator cleaned up. It's pretty nasty and crusty inside. I'm going to try to clean that with some CLR. And I got a loud bird behind me, so just ignore him. Pretty rough on the bottom. Top's not too bad. And you see right there on the radiator, it says 5 of 64. This is the original radiator for the tractor. This is a 1964 model tractor. Obviously they don't make radiators this good anymore. This radiator does not appear to be leaking, so I'm going to clean it up and get it repainted and get put back on the tractor. Most of the paint, as you see, is gone, aside from the blue where the tractor was repainted. Kind of in this area I knocked some paint off and I saw black paint. Pretty much how you see radiators, so I'm going to repaint it black. I'm not really planning on sandblasting any of this cast because there's only just this part right here, so everything will just be cleaned up to the best of my ability without sandblasting. Then we'll get everything painted. I'm going to come in here and straighten out these fins, and should be good to roll. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it up on its side like this and blow air through it in reverse. And that'll get a lot of the loose stuff off of it, and I'll get it cleaned up. I do have new bolts and new pads that go down here. These pads here have definitely served their purpose over the years, but they've seen better times. These carriage bolts, the bottom of the radiator is slotted to where they will come out. Like so. Alright, so now I'm going to start getting it cleaned up. Go from there. Alright, so there's quite a bit of crap blowing out of it. So now it's time to give it a wash inside and out. The CLR will only be on the inside to try to clean up some of the crusty calcium and stuff that's inside of it. overflow tube's clogged up too. So I'm about to blow it out, maybe run a wire through it. I actually do have one leak. Pretty much this seam right through here. Since this is brass, I should be able to solder that. And here's just the proof that it is actually leaking. You can see the bubbles popping up. So that'll have to be fixed. Alright, so pushed water through this side, flushed out, and that's when I found this little leak up here. Did that a few times. I took a wire brush, stuck it down into the neck down here and cleaned it out, flushed all that mess out. Like I say, now I just took some CLR. This is about a quarter of this thing in there. This is probably about 7 ounces roundabout. Poured it in, filled it full of water. Now I just have it sitting here. I'm gonna kind of agitate it a little bit and just let it set for probably about 30 minutes or so. Then I'll clean that out, do it one more time. I think that's all the CLR I have. And then I'll go from there. And I didn't do it just because it's kind of difficult to see, but if you look down into your radiator cap, you can kind of see how crusty your tubes are. If they're kind of crusty, clean them. If not, just do an exterior clean on it, paint it, and put it back on. And hopefully you don't have a leak like I do up here. Alright, so I got the radiator cleaned up and repainted. I went ahead and straightened out all the fins that were bent up. So this is almost ready to go back onto the tractor. There's a few things I need to do beforehand. And so I'm going to lay it down here on the side. We're going to put some new bolts in it and a new petcock. And then we're going to go ahead and get the fan shroud bolted on. Alright, for the bolts, you can get a kit from Dennis Carpenter. It's a 351 641 kit, or you can just get some carriage bolts from your local hardware store. And these bolts are 7/16. I think the kit is about a 3/4 bolt. A 1-inch bolt would probably do a little bit better, just because of these little pads. They don't really compress very well, and when you go to stick all this in the tractor, it's kind of hard to get the bolt to, or the nut to start. But to put the bolt in, you can see how they're kind of mushroom shaped. Stick the bolt in there sideways and turn it. You take the pad, and it'll slide up onto the bolt. And just temporarily, just to hold everything in place, we're going to go ahead and put on the washers and the nut. Alright, the petcock is just a 1/4 inch NPT. Which I don't have my thread sealer up here at the moment. So I'll have to do that once I go down to the chicken house, because that's where a thread sealer is. But Put thread sealer on your petcock, and it'll thread in right here into the lower radiator hose neck. Mine actually had a bolt stuck in it. So that's it for down here. Next piece is going to be our fan shroud. This is going to kind of slide into place. And then we have some new screws. Dennis Carpenter number for these is a 357 622-K. And they're just some self-threading sheet metal type screws with some external tooth lock washers. And they will just thread into the side and hold your shroud on. And your shroud may have two sets of bolts on it, or bolt holes in it. I'm not sure why, but on this row crop they use the upper set of holes. Alright, so there's the radiator now ready to go onto the tractor. Alright, so before I put the radiator on, I've got to put my fan blade on. This fan blade has the 4 mounting holes and then these 2 offset holes here that are kind of keyed, punched out, whatever you want to call it. They're going to go into these 2 little notches here. Alright, so I went ahead and put some pipe sealer on that drain plug. So now I'm going to slide the radiator down in. And it's just a matter of lining up my holes. And I did actually have to take and turn my fan just a little bit. So there, I got it setting down in. So now I got to get the nuts and washers on. And just tighten them down good and tight. That bottom plate on the radiator is a piece of steel, so you're not going to hurt it. So there's the radiator installed. Now it's time to get the hoses and the radiator cap on here. Okay, so first we're going to put on the upper radiator hose. I can put the number at the bottom of the video for that. And for the hose clamps, I like using these original style clamps. I'm going to try and get this on there without any lube, but I'm probably going to have to go get some lube to put on here. Slide it down on the engine block water neck and slide it up onto the radiator. Just be sure you got enough meat there to grab for the rib. On the lower hose, if you have power steering, you have to get this special J-shaped hose, and that's just to clear the belt. This hose is S.60594. The same thing, slide it onto the engine block first, which I know I'm kind of standing in the camera, but I have to be to push it. And then we'll slide it down onto the radiator. Now, this hose likes to kink, so I might come in here and trim this back a little bit, try to take some of this kink out. But just be sure that this will clear the drive belt. Okay, so on the lower radiator hose, I trimmed this 1/2 inch to take the kink out of this hose. And these hose clamps here are a little bit bigger than the ones up here. The clamps you want down here on the lower hose are an AB-8287. The ones for the upper hose are an 8BA-8287. And they're obviously smaller. So be sure you get the right clamps for the hose that you're changing or putting on or whatever have you. Alright. So now that we got our radiator hoses on there, fan shroud and radiator, all that is now fully installed. Alright, so now that our radiator's all installed, it's time to go ahead and fill this up with some coolant. The system capacity is 15 quarts. Now, of course, that's on a dry system. Well, since mine's completely dry, mine should be 15. I went and got some coolant. This is this Napa brand, universal, all make, all model kind of deal. And to let out a little secret, which may or not be a real secret, Peak Antifreeze makes this particular Napa antifreeze. So it's a good quality antifreeze. And this is not the pre-mixed stuff, so I'm going to have to mix it with some distilled water. But for starters, I'm going to go ahead and just pour a gallon of the coolant. Or, well, I guess this is technically antifreeze. It doesn't become coolant until you add water. But I'm going to go ahead and dump a gallon of antifreeze into the radiator. When I got about 1/2 gallon in there, I'm just going to take a quick minute and look around. Make sure I don't see anything leaking at the moment. Check the freeze plugs, upper and lower hoses, the radiator itself. Of course, check your water pump as well, which only 1/2 gallon. You know, you're not really going to see much just yet. Just kind of take it slow, make sure everything's good to roll. Oh no! Not good. Not good at all. Alright, so let's try this again. Right about this area, on the back side where there was some fin damage, there was a pinhole. I had a local radiator shop fix it for me. And they actually went back and refilled or fixed the seam on the back here that I had repaired. It was leaking as well. So they got it all fixed up for me, pressure tested it, it's good to roll. So now let's get this thing filled back up. I caught most of the coolant that was in here. I believe there's still some that's in the engine block. So I'm going to finish putting this whole gallon in here and then we'll add some water to it. Again, I just got some distilled water in here. I'm using the same jug, so there's a gallon of coolant in the tractor and it's going to be a gallon of distilled water. Okay, so since the capacity is 15 quarts, that's just under 4 gallons of fluid. So what I'm going to do now is take the antifreeze, that's the full strength, and I'm going to put 1/2 gallon of that in there. And then I'm going to fill the rest up with water. And that'll get me close to where it needs to be. Okay, I'm right there at about 1/2 gallon of antifreeze. When you fill these up, unlike a car that has the separate overflow, this just has an expansion tank on the top part of the tank. So you're going to fill this up enough to where you have your antifreeze just over the top of these fins, because you need room for this coolant to expand with heat. And if you don't, it starts pissing it out, this overflow tube, and then it goes down into your gardens. Okay, so now that I got that extra 2 quarts of coolant in here, I'm going to add extra 2 quarts of water. Alright, so if you've been doing the math, that is now 12 quarts of coolant. And I say this system takes 15. So to get to that 15, which I don't know why they just didn't make it 16, it would have been easy. I'm going to take that last half gallon of coolant that I got, and I'm going to go ahead and put half a gallon of water in it. That way the coolant that's in that jug is now a 50-50 mix. And then I'll just pour it in here to top it off whenever it gets up to temp, get my level right, and we're all set.